First of all, my name is Eduardo Martí. I'm the president of the college. I know when I went to college, I didn't know who the president was, even after being there for a long time. So this is who I am. This is how I look. This is how I sound. But I'm delighted that we have such a tremendous showing for this question and answer period. As you all know, the healthcare reform has been a pretty hot issue in this country, and I see a lot of people with white uniforms here, so it's an important issue for those of you who are in the health careers. And they're giving me a signal there that I think that he's coming. But what I would like to do, obviously I don't know the format. This is something that the Congressman asked to have, and obviously we're providing the venue for him to have this type of discussion. But my assumption is that it is a town hall meeting. My assumption is that he'll start out with some brief remarks about the issue, and then he will open it up for questions. So the nature of the questions is what's going to make this a fun and an interesting experience. And we have people of all ages here in this audience. So there will be a look at the healthcare reform from a number of different points of view, from the healthcare provider, from the young person coming forward in their lives and seeing how healthcare reform will affect them, to people like myself who are living in a city where if you want to get really good health care, you can only get it by paying cash on the barrel, and the physicians and some hospitals don't even take any insurance. So that whole issue is something that hopefully will be resolved by this reform. I recently had a hip replaced, and for those of you who are young enough not to even think about hip replacement, it's not a major operation, but it is a serious operation. And I went to a hospital and a physician that didn't take insurance, but I was able to recoup most of the amount through the paperwork that I did. I was in a meeting not too long ago, and a person who was a staff person for that meeting was going to have a hip replacement, and she asked me for the name of this physician. And I gave it to her, and she went, and she found out that, number one, he didn't take insurance. Number two, his price had doubled from the time that I had the operation. And, he didn't take Medicare. So if she wanted to be operated by this gentleman, she had to pay cash on the barrel and quite a bit of cash. I think that's something that the healthcare reform legislation is addressing, and I think it's a very major and important issue. Now, I am not going to embarrass the Congressman when he's here, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about him so that you can see the context of the individual. You're talking about someone who could be easily described as somebody who sort of bucks the system, somebody who works in an independent manner, somebody who can be acerbic, somebody who can really state what he thinks, and the consequences are something that sometimes he pays the consequences for his statements, and sometimes it works in his favor. When he was a young man, he ran for city council, and he was able to beat a primary of 4 individuals and a general election of 6 individuals, and became the youngest council person in the history of New York City. When you see him, you will see that he hasn't aged that much. He could be a student at Queensboro Community College, and he's someone that will go places. As you very well know, the Congressman is an individual. I'm embarrassing you.
Really?
Yeah. The congressman is an individual who...
Start at the beginning.
Well, I met this gentleman some time ago. He was a really good-looking guy who was born in Brooklyn, and he was educated in the public system of New York City. And he took, when Congressman Schumer became Senator Schumer, and for those of you who are old enough, remember that it was somebody called D'Amato that nobody thought could be beat. And Schumer went after him and won. And Councilman Weiner decided, well, I'm going to do that. And the machinery said, no, you can't do that. You're too young. You're too inexperienced. And he said, I'm going to do it. And he was able to win the election and became the United States Congressman. Very quickly, he rose through the ranks. And all you have to do is listen to him 2 seconds, and you know that will happen. He's a natural-born leader. And when he's now on the Committee on Energy, and that's an important committee in the Senate. But when the health care reform was being debated, he was a loud and consistent and persistent voice in favor of this legislation. And I think it's tremendously important that we have him here. He can tell us from his personal experience how this legislation was created, what are the good things and what are the bad things about it. And as I said at the beginning, before you came, this is not a speech. This is not a time that he's going to present a particular position. This is really a dialogue. And the interesting part of our morning is going to be the way in which you interact with the congressman. He's friendly. He doesn't bite. He will challenge you and he'll push the envelope. But I expect you to do exactly the same. So let's have a good dialogue, and permit me to welcome a wonderful New Yorker, Anthony Weiner.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here. I appreciate the President's kind introduction and your taking the time to be here. I know this is approaching the finals period and graduation and the like, and for you to take some time this morning to be here. I also want to say thank you for something else, a role that Queensborough Community College plays in our community. I think that the way that elected officials and their constituents deal with one another has gone through a transformation in the last 20 years or so. It was at one time a place where big institutions, the party, the apparatus, decided who the leaders would be and what the issues would be, and it was handed down essentially to citizens. And then we went through a period of, I would say, some social upheaval where people start saying, no, we're going to have the grassroots is going to dictate much more of what the elite in Washington and the legislature talks about. But in recent years, and not even the recent 10 years, the recent 3 or 4 years, with technology being what it is and institutions like this rising up, we've kind of have governance by conversation now. And whether it be through technology allowing instantaneous call and response, or just the fact that people no longer are satisfied with the way the institutions had become less democratic with a small d. And healthcare was really such a conversation. And I think became more actively involved in it because it had large impacts on New York City, and obviously it was something that I had studied and cared a lot about. But also I realized that there was a large population of Americans who wanted to engage in this conversation about healthcare and other things, and I was glad to be part of it. It began, by the way, in this issue of healthcare is not a new one. This is not a new challenge that we face. In fact, if you really start to think about it, it has been something that has vexed our country for the better part of 50 years or so. How do we provide health care in an affordable way? How do we make sure it's accessible to people? And we look at our country and we forget often what a young country we are. You know, we're still trying to figure out who we are. We know we want to be big, we know we want to be powerful, but we're kind of like a teenager who doesn't quite yet know where we fit in some of these things that other countries worked through generations ago. But let me begin this conversation. Again, I think the President's right. I don't want to spend a lot of time giving a presentation. I do want to spend some time getting some questions. Let me begin from the very foundation. That is why we had to do anything about health care, why we couldn't just continue the way we were going. Many people were satisfied that they were getting the care that they liked. And why was it that we were really so animated to do this in the midst of this economic downturn? Why was it necessary? First of all, it's important to understand how horribly inefficient our health care system is. We are fond of saying we have the best health care anywhere in the world. But in fact, the way we're delivering it is probably the least efficient of any country on earth. We spend about 18% of every single dollar we make, earn, and spend winds up going to health care. And what that means is when you spend that much money on health care, that's that many fewer dollars that you have to do more practical things with it, like hire people, like spend it on research, like spend it on developing new products. You know, I'll give you a real-life example. The Chevy Impala is one of the more popular cars that GM makes. They make it on the Canadian side of the Michigan border and on the Michigan side of the Canada border. I said they make it. I should say they used to. Well, after a while, GM started saying to themselves, you know what, we have the same contract with workers, UAW of North America, the same contract with both workers, but we're paying $7.25 an hour more to provide health care for the workers in the United States than in Canada. Why do it? Let's take all of those jobs and move them to Canada. A completely rational business decision that shows you that having high healthcare costs is usually impactful. And also the high healthcare costs are not just what it costs an employer. Think about what it costs all of you. You all, as citizens of New York City, pay about $8 billion with a B, $8 billion in additional taxes for the uninsured and the underinsured, who walk into hospital emergency rooms for their health care rather than getting it through an organized system of some traditional insurance plan. That is dollars, obviously, we know could go to CUNY. We know those dollars can go to other elements of the healthcare infrastructure, or those things can just go to giving raises to people who are in existing healthcare. But that example also reminds us of a couple of truisms here. We have 3 fewer hospitals in Queens than we had about a year and a half ago because of the unsustainable financing mechanism for health care. Now, you'll listen to me today and we'll have this conversation. This conversation is not about providing health care to people who live in this country. Everyone gets, as you know as students, everyone gets health care. If you're walking on outside this campus and, God forbid, you get hit by a car, someone is going to swoop in with an ambulance. They're going to do their best to resuscitate you. They're going to bring you to a hospital. They're going to patch you up. They're going to put you back together. The only question is how that care is going to be paid for. Are we going to pay for it? If you have insurance, then your insurance is going to take that cost, apportion over a bunch of people, and theoretically have a more efficient system. But what increasingly happens is people who don't have insurance, they're patched up, brought to the hospital, brought to the emergency room, put back together again, made healthy, and they don't have the money to pay, and we wind up paying. Or the hospital winds up absorbing. One thing that you should know is the bill fairy doesn't come in and pay that bill. So when people say, well, 40 million Americans, you know, what is that, 10% of America, maybe less? Why do we need to reorient the entire system for a relatively small number of people? That relatively small number of people who are uninsured are dramatically expanding the cost to all of us. So if you start with the premise that you've kind of got to do something, and by the way, the 17, 18% of our GDP that is going to healthcare is on an arc in the next 20 years to reach 50%. Now, we will never let it reach 50% of everything we make and earn. So to some degree, fixing healthcare is kind of like Buddhism. It's not whether you'll have change, but what type of change you're going to have. And so we decided this year, and to the credit of the President of the United States and also the electorate who said in campaign 2008, fix this problem, we decided, okay, we're going to step in and we're going to try to deal with this problem of the uninsured, try to get more people covered. But it had to begin from a very important stepping off place that I believe we went in the wrong direction. Now, I'm going to get to the place where I believe that I think what we did was ultimately much better than the status quo and a dramatic improvement, and it provides a foundation to improve further. But we in this country have really had an experiment going on for the last 40 years or so between two basic ideas of how you finance health care. One is the model that all of us have when we're employed or when we buy insurance. We give our money to insurance companies. Insurance companies cover lots of people. They apportion the risk over that large group of people. Some people are going to be healthy, some people less so. The cost for the whole group generally is lower because those costs are spread out. That's one model. The other model started almost 40 years ago in this country, but has been in place in other countries for over 100 years. It says, why do we want to give money to a company to do that? Why don't we as the government just say, you know what? We'll collect people's taxes. When they get sick, we'll pay to make them better. That's the way it is in Medicare for those 65 and older. That's the way it is for Medicaid for those who are below the poverty line. That's the way it is for veterans when they come home from war. That's the way it is for members of the military and the Department of Defense. That's the way it is for Native Americans who get care through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's the way it is for about 46, 47% of the entire country has a government-funded plan. Now, it's called a single-payer plan because the one payer that writes the checks to hospitals and doctors is the government. On the other side, it's basically a private insurance model. Now, we've had, if you say think 47%, we've had a dead foot race for 40 years to see who does it better. It is my belief that we, the government, do it better. And it's borne out by the facts. The Medicare system, which provides care for the most the most infirm part of our population, senior citizens, has an overhead and administrative rate of 1.05%. That's how efficient they are. Health insurance companies have overhead and profits and administrative costs in the neighborhood of 20 to 30%. Because remember, they have to provide the care, but they also need to provide profits because they need to return profits to their shareholders. On the other side of the coin, we have a Medicare system that is so popular that when we survey senior citizens each year, 96% of them say that they like Medicare. And if you ask people who are 62, 63, if you ask them, how would you like to get Medicare tomorrow? They're thrilled. Physicians and hospitals and clinics, when they're surveyed every year on a six-point scale, 4.5 out of 6 stars they give it. It's a good system that works. On the other side is the health insurance companies. They're the ones with the 800 numbers. They're the ones with people denying care because it's too costly. So this decision had to get made early on, and President Obama and Congress decided, let's go for the private model. I think that departure point, history will show is a mistake. But once you're in this private system, here's what they said we're going to do. If you have insurance, you're going to basically have to keep it because employers are going to be penalized if they drop insurance. If you don't have insurance, we're going to give you money, essentially. We're going to give you money to go out and buy health insurance, and we're going to try to reduce costs by getting all these health insurance companies in one place under one umbrella in one organizational system. And then we're going to put tougher regulations in place on healthcare companies so that they treat you a little bit better. That, in sum and substance, is what all the controversy is about. That modest proposal. Now, it's modest except if it's successful and we reduce the number of uninsured people by about 30 million and more small businesses have the ability to offer insurance to their workers, what will happen is theoretically, and this is the theoretical part of this, more people get covered, all of our rates come down, that healthcare inflation stops. It doesn't stop, but it slows down some. That's it. That's what the huge controversy was about, that modest idea. But that modest idea is the foundation of which is people should get health insurance. People should have some level of coverage. And the very notion that if you provide people health insurance, it's cheaper than providing them emergency health care. And let me conclude with this one thought, since it's apropos to this audience. This would mean, if it works, fewer people going into hospital emergency rooms getting chronic care, or getting emergency care, and more people getting primary care. more people being seen by doctors in a primary care setting, more people being seen by nurses, more people getting a checkup which determines they might have H1N1 rather than passing out on a bus and infecting other people with it. That is going to mean a transformation, we hope, in the way people are educated for and hired for health care jobs. In the bill, debt retirement for nurses. In the bill, more teaching hospital slots for primary care doctors. This would be a reorientation that is long overdue. We have too many people getting care in hospital emergency rooms. Therefore, we have too many people going into emergency care, and that's very expensive. If this works, and I'm confident that if it doesn't work, at the very least, we've now built a foundation that we can improve upon it. If this works, I believe we'll wind up not only saving a lot of money, but also dramatically impacting the way people, when they're thinking about, listen, I want to go into the healthcare profession because I want to take care of people, they are more likely to be going into primary care, nursing, those types of things than they might be today. That's the general ethos of the thing. As I said, I've had some disagreements through this process with the president and his approach, but I've had many, many more with those who say, just leave the hospital, just leave the health insurance companies to do their best to take care of us, because frankly, that business model doesn't necessarily work. And I said that was the last point, but let me make a final point. Get the notion out of your mind as we're having this discussion that this is a traditional economic model, that this is a capitalist type of pursuit. And think of the scenario. I rupture my appendix right now, standing right here. And by the way, I can't think of a better place to do it. You'd all probably know what to do. I rupture my appendix. At that moment, what true forces of economics do I really have coming to bear? I don't have choice. I've got a ruptured appendix. I can't say, I'd fix my gallbladder instead. Do I have a choice of insurance? No. Whatever insurance was given to me by my employer, most people get one choice. That's my insurance. Do I get to decide when I have my appendix dealt with? Do I get to shop around a little bit? See, maybe the appendix get cheaper at the end of the summer. I'll wait to do it then. No. Healthcare, and I'll go one step further. What if I had a genetic disposition to a ruptured appendix? What if I was born? I had no choice at all. I mean, it's a much more apropos. Someone was born with, predisposed to diabetes. Someone born predisposed to asthma. What choice did they truly have? So the idea that you hear sometimes when people have this, let the marketplace decide these things. There's no true marketplace when it comes to health care. There are some things that just are and that we need to take care of. Health of our citizens is one of them, and I think we're on the path to doing it a lot better. Thank you very much. I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have.
Yes. During the Bush administration, Medicare Advantage plans came into being. It was the decision there that maybe they could try and offload some of the costs from Medicare traditional to the Advantage plans. Under this new bill, as I understand it, some of the additional monies that had been given to Advantage plans in the past may in fact be rescinded. Where does that leave people who have in fact opted to go into the Medicare Advantage plans when in fact they were doing the bidding of the administration by offloading?
Right. Let me just say, Medicare Advantage, let me explain for the benefit of the room. We've been in a period, mostly under the Bush years, that we've been pursuing the notion that, the private sector, private drug companies, private insurance companies can do a better job than government. Obviously a position that I've already told you I disagree with. When we created coverage for seniors for prescription drugs, we didn't do it within the government. We said, let's give money to drug companies to go provide it to citizens, and so we've got a lot of gaps in that coverage. There was also this discussion that took place. Private healthcare providers said to the government, you guys, you don't do Medicare as well as we can do. Let's give some of that Medicare money to us, the private model, and we'll show you we can do it less expensively and provide better care. Now, many of the ideologically driven conservatives who were running Congress at the time said, yeah, let's show that Medicare is not so hot. So they said, let's assume it takes $1,000 a month to take care of seniors. They said, we'll give you companies $1,000. Anything that you save, you can keep, basically, is what they said. to show that they can do it, to experiment with these different models. Well, they said, well, we can't really do it 1,000. Can you give us 1,100? And then it's, can you give us 1,350? And then, can you give us 1,400? And then, the cost is about $1,600. Through that time, our costs were growing. We were saying yes to these companies. They were giving some marginally better services to citizens, but really all they were doing is taking the extra $500 and putting it in their pocket. So what we said in this law is, okay, we don't mind continuing these experiments with competition. A lot of people have Medicare Advantage, and for those of you who are not over 65, you see these ads on television, sign up for this plan or that plan. And what we said is this. Whatever you get and whatever you save has to go one of two places. It has to go into reducing costs for the customer or improving care for the customer. And we're going to take any of the extra profit back. Your job is not to, our job is not to just dump money into these private companies if all it's doing is generating this profit. So how are we going to do it? We're basically going to make them bid it now. We're not just going to give them $1,500 when they walk in the door. I believe that still some of these companies are going to continue to exist. They're just going to take a haircut. And I think that it's deserved. I mean, I don't mind. My father has a Medicare Advantage plan. And I told them that, look, about 16% of the money that we're giving them goes directly into their pocket, and it's coming out of the Medicare plan. And by the way, as a result of some of these savings, we're adding about 10 years to the life expectancy of Medicare. So what we're doing is saying, fine, competition is one thing, but we're not just going to write a check to you. You're going to have to show to show you're earning the money. Did I answer your question?
Well,
I don't want to dwell.
What's going to happen, though? Are they going to now cut?
Unclear. I believe what's going to happen is they're still going to get the reimbursement. They're still going to be in that business. They're just going to have to take a haircut on their profits, and they're going to have to compete now against other companies who want to sign up each Medicare patient. Yes, sir.
Yes. First of all, I want to commend you on the work you've done on our behalf on health care. I do respectfully have to disagree, before I get to my question, about what this entire battle is about. It's not about health care. It's about cutting Obama's legacy as quickly as possible, because I believe that there are elements in our government that feel that if he was successful in his first administration, they would never get the White House or Congress back, because we would be rolling. So if it were not health care, it would have been financial reforms on Wall Street. They would have done anything they could to stop it. Unfortunately, health care is the one that was the most complicated, and he picked. And besides that, they made sure they sucked $3.5 trillion out of our economy so that we would start with our foot in a bucket of cement. My question is, with the termination of coverage, which was one of the big points you supported, and I can't think of anybody who didn't support, even on both sides of the aisle, though they wouldn't vote for it anyhow. But I understand that the penalty for that is $100 a day. Am I right, or am I misinformed?
Penalty for not signing up for insurance?
No, the penalty for terminating coverage for an illness. For instance, a woman who comes up and then they find a pre-existing condition or some other reason why they don't have to cover, even if the government mandates that they do. If they violate the government's mandate, I understand that the penalty is only $100?
Yeah, well, let me just, first of all, that's partially true. Let me just take it on your first point. My presentation was about those of us in Congress who are trying to solve this problem. The gentleman is exactly right that every Republican member of Congress basically decided they were going to absent themselves from the debate, and I believe they're right. I believe it was a political calculation by and large. The sanction, what we do is we require insurance companies to do some things they weren't required to do before. Now, I should point out here in New York State, the requirements had already been in state law. But one of the things is that you can't deny someone care coverage for a pre-existing condition. The sanction, it's true, is $100 a day, but you're forgetting one element of the sanction that's very big. They can be removed from the exchange for failing to live up to the requirements of the exchange. They want those 30 million customers. Let me just stop at this point. You've heard some people say this is rampant socialism. It's the opposite. Because what we're doing is we're taking taxpayer dollars and forcing people to put it into a private entity. If it was truly socialism, it would be the other way around. We'd be saying to the health insurance, and by the way, I did propose this, saying to the private insurance companies, you should pay us for the benefit of having these rights. So when you hear people say, oh, this is rampant socialism, in fact, let's remember something. Medicare government does not provide the health care. It's just an exchange mechanism for your money. But the sanction, the real tough sanction, is they no longer then qualify for the exchange, because elsewhere in the bill it talks the minimum requirements for an insurance company to be in the exchange. That's a pretty big sanction.
If I were to Google that, what is the exchange I'm Googling? You know, to just find out more information on it. The exchange.
Forgive me. Yeah, this is what happens when you talk about this stuff so much, you become too glib. Forgive me. The exchange is the fancy name that we have for how we're going to control costs by putting all insurance companies that are going to provide coverage for this new group of eligible people to buy it, all of them in one place, one booklet, one store, one shop, to allow people to see them side by side, and so they theoretically compete with one another. We're calling that the exchange because I don't know why we're calling it the exchange, to be honest with you. I don't know why we call it the exchange. I guess it's a store, it's a whatever. It's what, by the way, 9 million federal employees and their families get, which is a booklet. Here are the eligible plans that meet the minimum federal standards. Choose the one that meets you, that suits you the best. If let's say Oxford says we're going to have lots of cases where we're denying people coverage, well, when it's their turn to apply to be in that exchange, the Department of Health and Human Services says, no, you have not lived up to the minimum requirements, you're out of the exchange, and you lose access to that 30 million, that block of customers. Yes, sir.
My American history students have an extra credit question on their final exam next week that you can help them with. We always try to relate the past to the present, and the question is, if Congressman Anthony Weiner had been a member of Congress in the 1930s, what do you think his basic view would have been about President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal?
Well, it was a similar time as today in that we were turning to the federal government to solve what seemed like an existential challenge to our way of life, to our economy, and to the very underpinnings. Remember, the period after the Great Depression, it was kind of like today in that Americans were turning to their president for leadership on how do we deal with these problems. And financial regulation was on the table. Social Security, there was no safety net for seniors, so we had a poverty rate about 35% among senior citizens, by the way. Social Security and Medicare has reduced that to single digits. So I think I would have been one of these people saying, you know what, we have to do it because no one else really can. Today is a similar moment in our American civic life with one dramatic exception. That then, maybe it was because technology didn't provide such instantaneous conversation as I've spoken about earlier, then you did not have fully half the legislative process saying no to everything. You really did have this notion of national need. And even Social Security, which was an unpopular ideal with Republicans at the time, philosophically they believed that, as they do today, that it was an expansion of government and it was socialization and the other thing. You still had about a third of Republicans voting for it. The same with Medicare. That you had, what I have proposed, the idea of expanding Medicare gradually to cover more Americans, not just those 65 and older, that was a Richard Nixon proposal. That Ted Kennedy of blessed memory went to his grave regretting not doing that deal. So I think I would have been saying similar things there, but I would have had much less institutional blowback in the 1930s about the idea that we should be trying to solve these problems at all. And I think you would not have politicians being rewarded, as it looks like they're being this year, for being obstructionist. I don't think you would have gotten away with it then, but I probably would have been a New Deal Democrat. And I would have looked really good in that 1930s clothes, too. I would have, double-breasted. I would have been all over that. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Anthony Weiner. My name's Steve Haas. In Rego Park. I want to thank you for a job well done. Anyway, continuing on that conversation that you had with the.
All right, go ahead. I can hear you. I'll repeat it.
Yeah. Anyway, the Second Bill of Rights with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, decent wages, proper health care. It was all discussed before. Anyway, My personal thing is that I'm on disability because I have hepatitis C and cirrhosis of the liver. Last stage, I was supposed to die 3 years ago. I don't think it's going to happen too fast. But the thing is what I dislike is why does my medical health care have to deal, as you mentioned just before, with the employer? I really don't understand that. Because basically, if my health care was away from the employer, I'd be still working in my job in a greater utility company. That's number one. What I have not heard yet is smart cards. What? You know, I read an article in Business Week on, I think it was the March 4th, and they talked about that the $660,000 death of a person who died of cancer. And it was a sad story, but one of the things is 2/3 of the money from going from one doctor to another doctor was paperwork. Pure paperwork, because one company has to pay $300, $400 to another company to get your paperwork. I already went through that myself too. I've seen it when I had GHI at one time. They charged $500 to send it from one doctor. I said, all I had to do is have a smart card, plug it in, and everybody in the world would know, and every doctor would know, well, we got to take care of this person.
Yeah, it's a good question.
In the dialogue. Try to raise my voice like
No,
that.
that's all right. I can see you don't need the microphone.
I mean, I'm from Queens, and you got to talk like this.
I hear you knocking. All right, let me just let me just take your points in order, because the first one is really one that I kind of glossed.
I'm not even done yet.
Oh, yes, you are. I'm just kidding. Look, the first point is one that I glossed over in my opening presentation. This notion of employers being in the job of selling shoes or writing software or manufacturing cars and being benefits managers for their workers is a novel idea around the world. How do we decide this? Why should it be that if you work in a shoe store on one side of Queens Boulevard, you get insurance, but if you work in a shoe store on the other side, you don't get insurance? Why is it that Walmart can charge us, $3 less for a pair of jeans, but provide no health care, so their workers have to go and get it on Medicaid? Why do we have that system? It's terribly inefficient, and the answer is we shouldn't. But that's the system that grew up in this country in the gap that was left by government not acting. So, I had a conversation with the president on Air Force One. See, not only did I name drop, I place dropped. And this was early on. This is early on, and we had kind of a little bit of a tense conversation, because I said, what you really should do is give a speech about how Medicare came to be, in keeping with the question that's going to be on the exam, how Medicare came to be, why it grew up the way it did, and how we grew up in it. And he makes the argument, it's too much of a shock to the system to change the employer-based system now. Maybe that's right, maybe it's not. By the way, at the end of the discussion, he said, enjoy your last trip on Air Force One. But there's no good reason to me that you should do this based on where you're employed. I think all of us should pay the taxes that we think that the government thinks are fair and necessary, and we divide up these important government services fairly and rationally. But your question about the smart card, we actually do a lot. We did a lot in the stimulus around e-medical records and the like. You're exactly right. The amount of paperwork moving around in the system is enormously expensive, and sometimes it's deliberately so. And I'll tell you what I mean. You go into a hospital administrative office, and you'll see 7, 8, or 9 inboxes for the 7, 8, or 9 major insurance companies. They all have their own paperwork. That's intentional, because they make money on the float. They make money on denying coverage. They make money on mistakes that are made on forms. But there is something to keep in mind, and the people in this room, this is going to be the group of people that's going to solve these problems. There are considerable privacy issues that you have to keep in mind. You want to make sure, you say you want a smart card with all your information. The problem isn't you having it or your doctor having it, but how you secure it. How you make sure that all that information going back and forth, suddenly someone doesn't say, you know what, we're going to scrub all these records for the word hepatitis. And we're going to try to figure out who those people are, and we're going to sell that data to someone who's marketing some new drug. Or an insurance company that has access to all that information doesn't poke around and see, you know what, this person is more likely.
You don't sell that information.
What?
I mean, and in the internet, they sell the information.
No. Can I tell you something? I signed up for Facebook 3 years ago, and if something wasn't being shared, is now being shared. The point is, once the information is in a digital form and easily transferable, you do have to make sure. No, I think this problem is solvable. I don't think it's not. And very often, you're giving up a certain level of privacy to get a certain benefit. In this case, it would be less expensive health care. But we're doing it. The first thing we're doing is we're going to have e-medical records. In the stimulus bill, we got money for doctors, hospitals to install these systems to allow them to share information. The reason it's so important, the primary way this is saves you money, you don't have to repeat tests. If you did a test, you don't have to have someone else do a test. You did an x-ray, you don't have to have someone else repeat an x-ray. If you can transfer it electronically, that's the way you solve that problem. Yes, sir.
2 questions. The first, how was lunch on Air Force One? And the second, how do you feel about putting together a proposal where we put a cap on malpractice insurance and a universal licensing for medical people so that you can lose that license if you are guilty of terrible malpractice in California and then come to New York and open up a shop?
I think that's the foundation for some kind of a compromise on how you deal with malpractice insurance. Part of the problem is malpractice insurance rates keep going up and up, even though malpractice insurance claims are going down. And it just reminds you that businesses are businesses. In Texas, which has the toughest caps on how much you can sue for, they found that when they put the cap into place, sure enough, the amount of money going out in claims went down. Insurance rates are basically the same as they are everywhere else in the country because insurance companies just took the money and put it in their pocket. But from the perspective of how you take the 2 or 3% of bad doctors who account for about 20% of the malpractice claims, I think that's the deal you do. You say, look, you doctors are going to have to agree to allow a much more readily available database of who the good ones or the bad ones, policing yourself whenever necessary. And in exchange, we, the government, will say, if you want to get an increase in the malpractice rates, you have to show that someone who you're raising actually contributed. And that might be the compromise. In both cases, the lawyers and the doctors are giving a little bit up, and I think that's how you do a good compromise.
What about lunch?
And lunch was, well, as you see, I eat like once a week anyway. Yes, ma'am.
I want to hear from my students.
Yeah, she's in the back there. That looks like a student.
Okay. I have a question. So we're supposed to be helping those who are uninsured, but what are you going to use to determine those people who are uninsured? Like, I was one of the people who lost my job from one of those hospitals that closed. But at the same time, even though I lost my job, I don't qualify for insurance. So, I mean, how are you going to determine?
Well, you're going to now. I mean, first of all, we have some experience for how this system is going to work out. It's similar to what was done in Massachusetts, where people had to get insurance. I don't think I mentioned this. If under the new plan, if you don't have insurance, you've got to get it. I mean, that's got to be the deal. There's no one's going to be able to freeload and say, you know what, I'm going to. But if you don't have insurance, then you just say I don't have insurance, and then you're going to be eligible to go into the exchange. What am I missing?
But if I'm unemployed,
Yeah.
how can you mandate?
Oh, no, here's what's going to happen. Oh, how do you afford it? How do we make sure you can afford it? Okay. If you're making less than $80,000 a year, we're going to give you a subsidy so that, a simple way of saying tax dollars, we're going to give you a subsidy to buy insurance to keep the amount you're paying of your income under 10% for health insurance. There are going to be some people who aren't going to be required at all. If you're at the very lowest economic strata, you're going to be expanded Medicaid is going to be available to you. And obviously, if you're over 65, Medicare is going to be available to you. But the way we're structuring it is anyone who can afford to pay is going to have to get it, and anyone who can't afford to pay is going to get a subsidy in order to buy it. Does that answer your question?
Why couldn't there be a provision for like students?
There is. Under the present law, if you are 21 or younger, insurance companies have to offer the option to your parents to cover you with insurance. Now that's going to be expanded to 26. The thinking being that group of people, you're getting your first job, you're starting out, you're less likely to have insurance. So now you're going to be eligible to be covered under your parents who have a traditional insurance. But if you are, now it doesn't start right away. Frankly, it doesn't start till 2014. But if you are And it seems like a long time to you. As I get older, that doesn't seem like such a long time. But the reason is that that it takes a little while to set up an infrastructure like this. But the way it's going to work is if you have no insurance and that insurance exchange is set up, you're eligible that day. You're going to get your subsidy. You're going to be able to then take it, and you're going to be able to shop in the exchange and buy insurance. You're going to be the target for this proposal. What don't you qualify for?
I don't qualify for Medicaid, which is something else that doesn't make any sense. Because we're unemployed.
No, but you're going to. We're expanding it. It's going to go from 133% of the poverty to 150% of the poverty rate. But if you're not eligible for that, you're going to be eligible for this new. You're going to be eligible to get a subsidy to buy insurance. The less money you make, the more subsidy you're going to get.
I mean, the rates for Medicaid are ridiculous because living in New York is expensive. Seriously, $700 and something a month. What can you really do with that?
I'm having trouble following you.
As far as Medicaid, how
Medicaid is for those who are at 133% in New York of the poverty line and less. Go ahead.
Yeah, because Medicaid, you have to, I think it's like $700 and something a month in New York, where the
For
cost
what?
of living-
$700
to
for what?
qualify per month.
Your
for
income has to be
yes.
low. Correct.
Yeah, but
But if you make more than that, we're going to give you money to buy insurance. Are you getting that? If you make more than that, we're going to take it. Let's assume it costs you $8,000 to get an insurance plan, and you only make $10,000 a year. Well, that's too low. $25,000 a year. We're going to give you money to go buy insurance at the higher rate. We're going to give you money. It's perfect, exactly what you need, right? You're saying you don't have enough money. We're going to give you money under the plan.
Well, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that the rates for Medicaid are kind of unfair because living in New York, where you have a high cost of living.
Do you mean the rates, when you say the rates for Medicare, you mean
qualifying for Medicaid?
Right, yeah, you got to be pretty poor, but if you're not, don't worry. You're still going to get health care. That's the good news. This is actually, you're exactly the person that this plan was written for. You can get Medicaid today, but now if you're above Medicaid, what do? Well, this is where the new plan comes into place. $8,000 a year to provide you insurance. You can't afford that. We give you the money to then go buy it. Because it's cheaper for us to do that than wait for you to go into a hospital emergency room.
How do you give the money?
Time out. Let me just get some more questions in. Any other students have questions? Yes, sir.
The issue, I mean, this might be a little elementary, but I want to ask it.
Far away.
It deals with illegal immigration, and that is a problem regardless of the morality of it. It does deal with a lot of money. And my question is this, I don't know if this is possible, but when we're dealing with illegal immigration, we pay the bill on the majority of it when it comes to the men, when it comes to health insurance, when they go to the hospital. Is it possible to give the home country the bill?
Okay, it's a good question. First of all, the question about a lot of this debate, by the way, got hijacked. Remember that guy yelled to the president, "You lied," during the State of the Union? It's when he pointed out, the president pointed out, that under the programs we're considering, none of these benefits, the subsidy or anything else, is going to go to people who are undocumented. But let me just point this out. While it may seem like we're being really tough and not expanding it to those people going to a hospital emergency, they're still going to get hit by cars. They're still going to get H1N1. All we're doing is just passing the bill back to us. Providing them with the insurance made a lot more sense. But the gentleman asked the question, why not send a bill for the care to the home country that person came from? Well, part of the challenge here is that people don't step forward and say, hey, I'm undocumented. Here's where I came from. This is the path I took, etc. But I want to dispute something you said, that it costs a lot of money to take care of them. Let's remember something. They're paying taxes. They're walking into employers with fake Social Security numbers. They're having withholdings for Medicaid. They're having withholdings for Medicare, withholdings for Social Security, and they're not getting any of that money back. This notion that people are getting paid with bags of envelopes of cash really is not the case. Most of the undocumented are paying those payroll taxes and paying them for us. In the last year, $4 billion worth of Social Security taxes were paid by the undocumented. They ain't getting Social Security when they retire. So that is a net. One of the reasons why figuring out the undocumented and how we bring them out of the shadows is it's a huge windfall for trust funds like Medicare, Social Security, and the others, because they'll be more likely to go in. Could you theoretically send a bill to Bolivia when someone's hit by a car of Bolivian extraction? I guess you could, and that's something I'm prepared to look at. Does that answer your...
I never said
No, you said it was costly.
It was costly. Okay.
And I'm disputing that. I'm saying it actually winds up being a net plus for us.
If you have 20% of our federal prisons filled with illegal immigrants, and then we have to pay for that, I mean, that's kind of a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can't look at one tree in the forest and then draw a conclusion. What you've got to do is, what about the 99% of the undocumented who are not in our federal prisons, who are paying taxes, who are contributing to the economy and the like, who are raising property values because they're buying homes, who are raising the standards in schools because their kids are studying hard, and they're paying taxes that are going to you and me in services but not to them. So I just think you've got to look at the aggregate. And there's no doubt about it. The challenge of the undocumented is a big one, and we have to figure it out. But it is, I believe, when you net everything out, the undocumented actually wind up being a windfall still for the taxpayers, and normalizing them and bringing them out of the shadows would be an even bigger one. But I was just saying, I was disputing the idea that they're a net cost in health care, since they are paying payroll taxes. But anyone who's uninsured does take a big hit. Whether it's documented or undocumented, anyone who's uninsured who goes into a hospital emergency room winds up taking a pretty big hit out of all of us. Sure, of course.
It's actually a different issue, but it's about healthcare, obviously. Abstinence. There was a part of the bill that actually subsidized for it. I think it's every year $50 million. So in 4 years, it'll be $250 million put towards abstinence programs. My question is this: if the Democrats knew that they can pass on a simple majority, why did they even allow that to be inside the bill?
Good question. I'm with you. You know, if once the Republicans said we're not going to vote for anything, I don't know who we were negotiating with. I don't know who we were bargaining with. I don't know. The president, to his internal credit, has a notion about. He works every day, and we all do to some degree, but he really does, this idea of trying to get things to be more bipartisan. He has yet to learn what I learned a while ago. He's got less experience than I do. I can tell you these Republicans are not going to help. They're a wholly owned subsidiary of the health insurance industry. That's who they do their bidding for. They see no political advantage in helping us pass any of this stuff. Once that becomes included, once we internalize that, then I think it allows us a certain liberation just to do what's right for the country. So, yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff that was included in the bill. I'll give you one. Well, actually, this wound up getting dropped out. You know, let's talk about the death panels? You know that? That was a Republican idea. That actually made some sense. The idea of when people turn 65, every state has a do not resuscitate order you can fill out, or a living will you can fill out. All 50 states have them, but no one ever offers seniors very much help in filling them out. So this idea was have a free visit every year that they can have with their doctors just to talk about that. Well, the health insurance industry, with our former lieutenant governor and a lot of support from Fox News and others, turned that into this horrible idea we're going to pull the plug on Granny. That was a Republican idea. So I think you're right. I mean, I have a much more, I think that sometimes we as Democrats, we go into knife fights carrying library books. You know, and the other side comes in, they just beat us over the head all the time. And we're like, oh, stop hitting me, stop hitting me. I just think, listen, if they don't want to participate in governance, we'll do it. We'll do it without them. Yes, sir.
I think you just asked in reference to his question, who were you bargaining with at that point? And I think the answer is special interest groups. We've seen increasingly the amount of influence of special interest groups have, not only in taking part in the debate, but in influencing specific pieces of legislation word for word.
Right.
So I'm asking, what are you and your party doing to stop this? We've now seen the Supreme Court decision only increase.
Right. The question is the influence of special interest groups. What is a special interest group?
A special interest group is a lobbying organization, a union that gets money from private funding, private sources of funding.
Why does it have to be private? Let me ask you something. Is the National Association of Community College Students a special interest group? Yeah. No, that one you like. That's the difference. That one you like.
Well, it's not only a matter of like, it's a matter of who are they representing in Washington. Are they representing corporate interests, or are they representing a general?
Well, but here's the problem. Listen, I'm with you, and I spend all day fighting with a lot of these interests I disagree with. I just think we have to be I think that in this environment, in an educational institution like this, then we don't just look at the top line slogans. We think a little bit more beneath the surface, and something that Queensborough Community College stresses that it likes its students to do, think critically. All we are interest groups. We are one interest group after another, and at the end of the day, the American Association of Retired People represents people over 65. They're an interest group. People who represent healthcare workers are an interest group. People who represent people who have stock in of hospitals are an interest group. Sometimes they work together. A lot of times they work shoulder to shoulder to make sure that Medicaid cuts don't happen. Sometimes you have British Petroleum is an interest group with other drilling companies, but so are farmers who make corn that make ethanol. So they're an interest group, and they're very often pushing for the exact same things. In healthcare, you've got nurses as an interest group, you've got doctors are an interest group, you've got lawyers are an interest group, you've got hospitals that are interest group, you've got senior citizens, you have young people. The challenge is not so much to get interest groups out of politics. It's to get money out of politics. And I don't mean money, a bag of 20s being left on the desk of a congressman's office. I mean the sheer number of dollars that goes into waging campaigns requires every congressman to spend 4 hours of the day calling up strangers and saying, can you give me your money so that I can run for re-election? And that requirement means that that's 4 hours that they're not solving the world's problems. That requirement means that they're going out and spending a disproportionate amount of time talking to people that have money and a less proportion of the time doing this, speaking to people that don't have a lot of money. So my challenge as a congressman is not, well, I've got British Petroleum on one side and the citizens of my district on the other. You can have a gazillion dollars, and they do. They're not going to win my vote. The health insurance industry is going to do everything they can this year to make sure I don't get reelected, because I just spent the last 14 months ripping them every place that I could. So that's not the challenge. The challenge is the sheer ocean of money that is necessary to wage a modern campaign has made it such that a 2-year term, which is what I serve, and I'm honored to do so, you have to spend almost an entire 2-year term trying to get money from people, and the people that are most interested in the outcome of legislative fights are going to be the ones that are most animated to participate in that. That's the challenge. That's what we need to change. And I believe that interest groups are part of having, someone advocating for the environment and someone advocating soiling the environment. It's an easy call for me. The real challenge is the people advocating soil the environment have enormous amount of sway because of the money that they have to participate in the system. Yes, sir.
All right. You said before that you wouldn't vote for the bill unless there was a strong public option. And Congressman Kucinich from Ohio, he also said before and after he flip-flopped on the bill that this was basically a big wealth transfer to the insurance companies. So not only, and now you said before that, if you don't have insurance, you're going to have to buy it. So not only is there no public option, there's no option at all. So
there's no option at all. What do you mean there's no?
You said if you don't have insurance, then you're going to have to buy it. So that means there's no real option.
Oh, no, but you have an option of all kinds of different choices within that.
Well, my question is exactly how many IRS agents are going to be hired, and
is this your big breakthrough to get on O'Reilly? Good luck. Okay.
No. Why did you change your mind?
Okay. First thing, none. 0 new IRS agents are going to be hired. And the next thing, I didn't change my mind. Here's what first of all, I never said I would not vote for any bill that didn't have a public option. The question that you're asking is if you'll forgive me, the question that you're asking is how you make a decision at the end of the day when you don't get everything that you want. And I believe the seminal calculation is it better than the status quo, and does it give us an opportunity to do things better in the future? Does it give you a foundation on which to build? I believe in the first part, the answer is definitely yes. It's going to reduce costs to government. It's going to give people additional options for health care. It's actually literally going to save people's lives. On the second question, definitely yes. You have a foundation on which we're creating this public exchange, putting in a public option in the future. saying to the exchange, we're going to have Medicare included in this exchange, definitely is a foundation on which to build things going forward. Did I answer your question?
All right, one more question.
That's a yes, and we're moving forward. Go ahead.
So, if I don't buy insurance, then what happens?
What happens if you don't buy insurance is that you put on you don't have to. There's nothing in the law that says you have to, but you will pay additional tax if you don't. It's kind of the old constitutional thing. The rights of my fist end at your nose. Like, I can do whatever I want, but when you start impacting my life, you've got to pay. And so since you're not getting insurance, means that all of us pay more. You've got to pick up some of that cost. And so that's the way it's going to work. On your form, it's going to say, put down your insurance number. I don't have one. So then the next line is going to be, if you don't have one, you pay this additional amount because you don't have one. And then, because we're going to have to patch you back together if, God forbid, something happens to you. Here, stand by. Yes, ma'am. Were you raising your hand? No? Yes, sir.
My question is, why are members of Congress exempt from this reform?
We're not. We're all going to be in the exchange.
But there's a lot of reports, actually, the bill said you guys would be exempt.
Nope. We're included in the exchange.
Are you sure of that?
Yeah. Pretty sure of that. Yeah, here's the thing. Here's one thing you should know in this discussion. A lot of what you've heard is just not true. I mean, that's part of what went on in this whole thing. Look, you have a great opportunity now. You're speaking to someone who not only read the bill, but wrote the bill. So I'm telling you that we're all included. Now, I frankly think that it was pretty ridiculous, but I'm thrilled to be. Look, I had what was supposedly a smart reporter ask me if I like Medicare so much, how come I don't get it? Because I'm about 20 years too young to get it. I would love Medicare. Love it. I would love not paying 30% in overhead to my insurance company, but unfortunately, I'm going to be in the exchange.
One more question.
Sure.
These amendments won't be implemented until later on.
You mean the law?
Yeah.
This law?
Why can't we demand now?
Yeah, some things are now. For example, if you're between 21 and 26, overnight, you're now eligible to be included in your parents' exchange. If you are a small business, overnight, you're getting a tax benefit to put people on insurance. If you're on Medicare, overnight, your gap for drug coverage is going to be closed. Some elements are going to take a little while. We have to build essentially an infrastructure for a national exchange for healthcare that doesn't happen very quickly. Now, I would like everything to happen quickly, but remember, this is essentially a new health insurance. It's not like a company, but it's an infrastructure for a company that is going to cover 30 million Americans. That's a big operation. And so even if you were going to start tomorrow with a private company to do that, it would take you a little while to get it going. But I agree with you. I have the same level of institutional impatience you do. I want to have everything happen as quickly as possible, but there are some things that there was generally a sense that we were very concerned about getting this right. Like, we want to make sure that the experience people have doesn't lead them to say, boy, what chaos. And so that's why the thing is being phased in over time. Some of the more complicated things are happening later on. The simpler things are happening now. And the setting up the exchange is pretty complicated. Yes, sir?
How is the subsidy amount determined for people who can't afford health care?
Basically, the subsidy seeks to keep everyone's out-of-pocket expense for health care below, I think it's 11%. So you report what your income is. If it's less than $80,000, there's no subsidy. Basically, it's going to be if you can afford to get insurance, you should get it. Meaning if you make more than $80,000 a year, you can afford to get insurance, you should go get it. If you're less, it's going to be a sliding scale of subsidy depending upon how much below $80,000 you are, with the magic number being keeping it $11,000. So if you know calculus, that means you've got to have a couple of variables filled in. You've got to know what the average insurance rate is. You've got to know what the person's income is. And that resulting figure is going to be your subsidy. Yeah, I think the way it's going to be is the percentage of your taxable income. So it's going to be that bottom line on your tax that you pay taxes on. That's going to be the number that is going to be used for this purpose. The idea is going to be, though, just so you understand, is that we want people to be able to buy insurance. So the subsidy, and this is where people say, oh, the cost is going to go out of control. If there's not cost containment on how much it costs, then yes, this is going to bust the budget. Congressional Budget Office, Department of Office of Management, but the people who do these estimates think that as these more people get into health insurance, you're going to have more young people like those in this room, which then are going to bring the average cost for everyone down. It's like car insurance. Car insurance, this is what health insurance is kind of a weird hybrid. We all have car insurance under the law. So good drivers, bad drivers, intermediate drivers are all in one giant pool. Health insurance companies can apportion risk over the whole pool, bring the average cost down. Theoretically, I hope this works, theoretically to be the same with health care. 30 million new Americans get in, you apportion risk over a bigger group, everyone's costs come down. That's the theory.
What about portion?
Yes, ma'am. Let's try to get a few more people. Yes, ma'am.
What about someone who's been unemployed with all the cutbacks? Their COBRA is about to expire, federal COBRA. What do they do until all this set comes back?
Okay, we do a couple of things. One, in the near term, we're extending the eligibility for COBRA. But in the longer term, you're going to be an unemployed person who's going to be eligible for this new benefit. I mean, the idea is being, first of all, this is another reason why the employer-based system, what if you're offered a great job and the economy says, all right, this is where you should be, you're offered this great job, but you don't have health insurance at that new job? Your mobility and the efficiency of our marketplace is getting dragged down by the silliest thing, and that is your inability to travel from one job to another and have that kind of portability. But we're going to expand COBRA, and hopefully you'll be employed. You'll be employed at some place that offers you insurance. But if you're not in 2014, you'll be able to buy into the exchange.
What about when will the COBRA be expanded?
I think the COBRA expansion happens the end of this year, but I can check for you. Max, can you check the COBRA expansion, and I'll give you a buzz. And let you know. I have time for one final question, and then... Yes, sir. Just want to yell out. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think someone's mainly concerned that why they're opposed to health care. Will America be drowning taxes in the future?
Will America's taxes be going down? Oh, well, this wind up being no. Look, if this is not a net savings for the country, then it's a terrible failure. Because right now, we'll be drowning in taxes if we do nothing, for sure. As I explained to you earlier, it is Medicare is going to go bust in 2017. We're not going to let it, so that'll be taxes. Enormous amount of taxes we pay locally. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, which is kind of the nonpartisan scorekeeper, we're going to have about $1 trillion, $1.2 trillion over the next 20 years in net savings. Okay. Right now, our failure to touch health care is leading an enormous amount of costs. And I'll tell you, there's one other thing you always should keep in mind when you see discussions about this, and that is that you can't just look at the cost to the federal government in taxes. You got to look at state taxes, you got to look at city taxes, and you got to look at how much extra everything we're purchasing cost, because you've got to include that cost in every product, in everything that we own. When you have $7.25 an hour extra going for a car, that gets passed along to the cost of the car. So it has to be a savings. If it doesn't, if we wake up in 10 years and all these costs are still going through the roof, it is going to be proof points of two things, I think. One, that this mechanism of getting more people insured to bring down insurance rates didn't work. And two, that Weiner was right. The only way to provide health care and to truly control costs is a single-payer system like Medicare for all Americans. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.